Hi everyone, this is Shalini, Assistant Professor of English, St. Joseph's College of Arts and Science, Autonomous, Cuddalore. Now we are going to discuss the topic, The Birthday Party, written by Harold Pinter. Harold Pinter was born on October 10, 1930. He was died on 24th December 2008. He was a British playwright, screenwriter, director and actor. He was a Nobel Prize winner. He was one of the most influential modern British dramatists with a writing career that spanned more than 50 years. His best known plays include The Birthday Party, published in 1957, The Homecoming, published in 1964, and Betrayal, each of which he adapted for the screen. His screenplay adaptations of other works include The Servant, The Go-Between, The French Lieutenant's Woman, The Trial, and Sleuth. He also directed or acted in radio, stage, television, and film productions of his own and other works. Let us see the characters who are involved in the play. Petty Bowles, owner of the run-down boarding house. Meg Bowles, in a childless marriage, has an affair with Stanley. Stanley Webber, a man in his late 30s. He is the protagonist of the play. Lulu, acquaintance of Meg, is interested in Stanley and is attracted by Goldberg. Goldberg, also called as Jimmy, and Benny is a Jewish gentleman who works for an unnamed organization. Dermot Megan, an Irish member of an unnamed organization that has hired him to take Stanley away from the boarding house. Let us see the act-wise summary. Act 1. The setting is a living room of a house in a seaside town in England. A middle-aged woman named Meg serves cornflakes to her husband, Petty, at the table. Petty reads the newspaper and two of them talk about the news. Meg asks if their boarding guest Stanley is up yet and talks about how she used to enjoy watching Stanley play piano. She surprises Petty with 2 pieces of fried bread which he enjoys. Now Petty shares that he spoke with 2 men the night before who asked for a room for a couple of nights. Meg assures him that she has a lovely room ready for them. Their attention turns to Stanley, who still has not made an appearance. Stanley comes downstairs after Meg calls for him. He is unshaven and wears glasses. Stanley complains about the cornflakes Meg serves him and his lack of sleep that night. He is grumpy and disrespectful to Meg and demands that she prepare a hot breakfast for him. An odd exchange ensues between Meg and Stanley. Meg is offended when Stanley uses the word succulent and tells him that he should not use the word with a married woman. He apologizes to her and calls her a succulent old washing bag. She is initially defensive and shortly after asks him if she is indeed succulent. Meg informs Stanley that 2 men will be staying with them for a bit. He is curious about the men but eventually says that he does not think they will show up. Stanley announces that he has been offered a job playing piano in a nightclub in Berlin. He claims that he has played all over the world but then clarifies that he once gave a concert. He was released the next morning. He left for good. He has been with Meg and Petty ever since. Stanley stands up and faces Meg to taunt her about a van with a wheelbarrow coming to take someone away. A knock interrupts the exchange. Meg's friend Lulu enters with a parcel that she is leaving for Meg and Petty. Lulu examines Stanley and tells him that he needs to take care of his appearance because he looks terrible. Suddenly, Stanley invites Lulu to come away with him which she dismisses before leaving. Stanley exits to two men named McCann and Goldberg knock on the front door and then enter the living room with baggage. McCann is concerned about whether they are at the correct house. Goldberg tells him to relax and rattles on about his uncle Barney. Goldberg also tells McCann that he is right for the job ahead of him. Meg returns and welcomes the guest. Goldberg and Meg discuss their permanent guest Stanley, and both men listen attentively. Meg invites both men to a birthday party that she will be having for Stanley that night. Goldberg is excited about the party that Stanley knows nothing about. The men exit and Stanley enters just before Meg comes from the outside. He asks about the two men and demands to know their names. He is able to figure out the name Goldberg from what Meg says. He sits slowly at the table when she confirms the name. Meg tries to cheer him up by giving him his birthday present. Stanley denies that it is his birthday but opens the present to find a boy's drum. He puts the rope around his neck and begins to march around the room drumming. The regular rhythm evolves into a frenzied banging before Stanley loses control to himself. Act 2. Stanley enters the dining room where McCann is tearing a newspaper into 5 equal stripes. The men introduce themselves to each other. McCann discourages Stanley from leaving the house and shares that Meg has set up a birthday party for him. Stanley is sure that he has met McCann before, but McCann denies it. The men discusses about business. Stanley describes his quiet life at the house and emphasizes that he is the same man he has always been. Stanley becomes agitated and pleads with McCann for information about why he is there. He invites McCann out for a type of Irish beer called Guinness and shares his love for Ireland while McCann listens. Petty and Goldberg enters from outside and Petty introduces Goldberg to Stanley. Goldberg reminisces about a beautiful girl from his youth before Petty leaves for his chess night. They cross-examine Stanley by asking him questions about leaving the organization and a wife. Goldberg orders McCann to remove Stanley's glasses. The questions eventually become ridiculous, but this time Stanley is sweating and moaning. Meg enters wearing an evening dress and ready to begin the party. She is oblivious to what has transpired among the men. 4 bottles of scotch and 1 bottle of Irish whiskey are brought out for the party. Meg enjoys a little bit of flirtation from Goldberg. The guests prepare to toast Stanley's birthday. McCann turns off the light and shines a torch onto Stanley's frightened face. Lulu walks into the room just as Meg finishes the toast. Goldberg is immediately enamored with Lulu and two begin flirting. Goldberg offers a toast and the festivities begin. Stanley is quiet. Meg suggests playing a game called Blind Man's Puff, where one person is blindfolded and must find one of the others standing in the room. They talk their turns being blindfolded when it is Stanley's turn. McCann asks for Stanley's glasses. Meg secures the scarf around Stanley's eyes. McCann suddenly snaps the frames of Stanley's glasses and breaks them. He places the drum in Stanley's path. Stanley walks into the drum and falls over. He rises and approaches Meg. Stanley begins to strangle her just as the lights go out. Lulu stumbles and falls while the rest of them fumble for the torch. McCann eventually finds the torch and shines it on the table, where they find Stanley giggling over Lulu on the table. Stanley backs up against the wall and laughs. Act 3. The next morning, Petty enters from outside of the home and sits at the table. He and Meg discuss the events from the night before. Meg does not remember much and is disappointed that the drum was broken during the party. She is worried about Stanley, who has not come down for breakfast yet. Meg assumes that Megan and Stanley are old friends because Megan was with Stanley in his room earlier. Meg notices a big car and worries that there might be a wheelbarrow in it. Petty reassures her and tells her that it is Goldberg's car. Goldberg comes down from upstairs. Meg leaves for the store. Petty asks if Stanley is feeling better. Goldberg tells him that Stanley needs to see a doctor for his nervous breakdown. Goldberg explains that these things can happen suddenly sometimes. Petty says that he will take Stanley to the doctor if he is not better by noon. But Goldberg tells him that it has all been handled. Megan comes down and tells Goldberg that Stanley has been upstairs trying to fit the eye holes of his broken glasses into his eyes. Goldberg announces that he is taking Stanley to the doctor. He tells Petty that they will be gone by lunchtime. Petty leaves. Neither Goldberg nor Megan want to bring Stanley downstairs. Megan is agitated. Goldberg yells at Megan for calling him Chimney, which is a childhood name, and then begins a rant about his life, values, and accomplishments. He ends by asking Megan to blow into Goldberg's mouth, which he does. Lulu enters from upstairs. She is angry at Goldberg and accuses him of taking advantage of her. He responds by trying to flirt with her. Megan enters and taunts Lulu by asking her to confess. She angrily leaves after telling the men that she knows what is going on. Stanley enters with a bowler hat in one hand and his broken glasses in the other. He stares and does not talk. Goldberg and Megan take turns telling Stanley what he needs. The suggestions become more ridiculous as they continue. Stanley is unable to speak. Petty arrives just as the men prepare to take Stanley out the door. Petty is angry and demands that they leave Stanley alone and yields to Stanley to resist. The men leave with Stanley. Meg returns and asks about Stanley. Petty tells Meg that Stanley is still asleep. She is excited that Petty agrees she was the belle of the ball. Thank you.